for this step in the arrow building, we're going to add a penny onto the head of our arrow. So the finished step is going to look like this. The penny is in here in this duct tape, and the first piece of the foam is pushed down on the arrow shaft. So to get to this point, I'm going to take the arrow shaft. It can't have a tip. So if you got arrow shafts that come tipped, you take a pair of pliers and you grab the arrow tip and you weasel it off and you take the tip away. So you want nothing dangerous on the end here. It is against the rules to have a tip inside of the arrowhead, and it is extremely dangerous. And then we're going to add a penny in the center of this, and the purpose of having the penny is so that this arrow shaft can never puncture anyone. So even if all of the weapons checking was ineffective and the arrow foam breaks down completely and we're really down to the penny here, this would cause a bad bruise if it hit someone, but it wouldn't pierce through anyone's skin. So that's why we have the penny in here. So to get there, we're going to layer on some duct tape. I like to use Duck brand duct tape because it's kind of cheap and it's pliable more so than better brands of duct tape. You can pull it and stretch it different ways while you're forming around the arrowhead with it. And so you can see mine is torn into thirds, so it's about 1/3 of the width of a roll of duct tape that you need to start building up the base of where the penny goes on these. Oh, and I need to add this piece too. This is the foam, the first piece of foam, and it already has a little penny-shaped hole drilled out of it. So I'm just gonna put this like this and push it right through like that. And now this is ready for once I have the penny, I can pull it back up and the penny will just slide and fit nicely inside that little hole. So this will take a couple layers of this duct tape. I'm just going to take some long strips and start building up a little can-shaped chunk of duct tape on the end of this. Let's see, is it big enough? Yep, it's big enough. So you can see the penny just kind of sticks to the edge there. You want it to be just the right size of the penny, not a little bit bigger, not a little bit smaller. You want it to just be flush all around like this. And then once you can kind of stick the penny on the end there, you take 2 more little pieces of tape and you make an X over the top of it so that it'll never come loose. After you put the X on the top, there is no need to add more duct tape to this around the bottom or anything, because in the next step we're going to add some hot glue and this thing is never going to come apart. So this is plenty of duct tape for the inside of this. So here's the finished end. For this next step, we're going to use hot glue to put together these two dense pieces of foam, and we'll have a finished step that looks like this, with this bottom piece of foam and then the first disc. This is the thicker, more dense disc of foam that's harder to squish. When you put these together, you want it to go from more dense to medium dense to less dense. So when an arrow impacts someone, you have the kind of bounce factor. So here's our arrow that's ready to be hot glued. Here's the penny. And here's the can shape of foam. And I'm going to pull this pretty close to the penny, and I have my hot glue gun ready to go here. And I'm going to hold the arrow shaft between my knees. And I'm going to squirt some hot glue into that hole. And I'm going to pull up this foam and kind of spin it as I pull it, so all the hot glue gets smeared around in there. And what this does, it kind of melts the foam and everything just gets stuck together like this. You want to pull this up so the foam and the penny are flush. And sometimes you have to pull it kind of hard, and that's okay. If you put too much hot glue, some of it might come out the bottom here, and that's okay. Just try not to burn your fingers, and then once it cools, you can just kind of pick it off with your nail. And then next, I'm going to take this denser disc of foam. I'm going to hot glue it on top of this here. So, take my hot glue gun. I'm going to make a little circle of glue around the edge here, and then do some around that penny, and maybe a little dab in the middle. And put this on here. And I'm going to spin it and swirl it a little bit so all that hot glue gets smeared around in there. And then I'm going to press it together for a minute while the glue cools. And what this does is it, like I said, it kind of melts the foam and it makes this little can shape of foam that is never going to come apart. So down the road, if the arrow gets old and breaks down and some of it starts to fail, you can take it apart and strip it down to this level, and this will still be good probably. So you might have to get some more of the open cell foam on the end, but this part should probably never need to be rebuilt, and it'll never come apart because everything's just all glued together. It's like welded together with this hot glue. And here we are. For this step, this is super easy. We're going to take some black hockey tape. This is Hampton brand. The brand doesn't really matter. I have an 1.5 inch wide roll, and we're going to take the arrow cans that we've made so far and add this layer of foam onto the top of it with one piece of tape. So the easiest way to measure how much tape you need without actually measuring it is to take the back of the tape that's not sticky and go like this around the arrow, and that's how much you need with a little bit extra. You set this on there, and I'm holding it between my knees. And adding just one layer of tape to just loosely tape this foam on there like that. For the last part of this arrow building, we're going to take this open cell foam, this here, and attach it this way onto the arrow. And to do this, we're going to use duct tape and black hockey tape. So I have Duck brand duct tape and some black hockey tape that I'm going to use. I also have 10 by 10 squares of lightweight cotton fabric, and then I've cut the corners off of each one so it's kind of an octagon-ish. And so I like to set up all of my duct tape before I start so that I don't have to stop and keep ripping it, because the duct tape kind of helps keep everything centered as you're going. So I'm going to make 8 pieces about this big. And this is maybe 3 inches long, I guess. And I'm going to stick it down on the table down here, kind of off camera. In addition to these 8 pieces, I'm also going to make 4 little pieces that are about just the size of my finger. And these aren't really structural or anything. These are just to help keep the fabric in place while I'm layering on more tape. Okay, so here's our arrow. It is ready to receive the open cell foam like this. And I'm going to take my first 4 bigger pieces of duct tape and try and make this centered. So what I'm doing is I'm feeling with my fingers. I'm holding the arrow shaft in between my knees. I'm feeling with my fingers and spinning this arrow to try and make this thing as centered as possible, because we want nice ice cream cone shaped arrows that will fly straight to our victims' faces, not lumpy potato shaped arrows that miss their targets. So what I'm doing now with each piece of duct tape, I'm going to try and turn so you can maybe see what my hands are doing. I'm never going to go more than like 1/3 of the way up this open cell foam. And I am sticking this duct tape onto the open cell foam, and you can see that this is still like a loose flap. And then I'm compressing this open cell foam inward, but not downward. Because if you pull it downwards, then you lose part of the effect of the foam, like that bounce factor. And you don't want to lose the effectiveness of the foam. So I'm going to do this 4 times all around this arrowhead. And try and just start out with this held in place and make it as centered as possible. So now maybe you can see why I like to tear my duct tape before I start, because it kind of likes to come unstuck if you pause for very long. So, okay, so now this should be like centered-ish. And as you go through the steps of adding tape here, you want to keep recentering this, because the more tape you add, the more difficult it'll be to make it centered. So that's pretty good. So now I'm going to use my black hockey tape, and I'm going to pull this much. I guess that's maybe a foot of tape, I don't know. And what I'm going to do with this is I'm going to stick this at 45-degree angles. So here's let me try and explain this better. So here's the shaft of the arrow, up and down, right? And here's how the foam meets the shaft of the arrow, so that's 90 degrees. So then 45 degrees is like this. So I'm gonna stick this tape at a 45-degree angle and press in, but not pulling the foam down, like this. And then I'm going to pull this tape, and there's a learning curve here, so don't feel bad if you mess this up the first few times. You can always undo the tape and redo it. I'm going to keep this tape a little bit taut, and I'm going to spin this arrowhead and wrap the tape around the bottom of the arrow and bring it back around to the top, crossing where I started. So here's my first piece. So I started here, and I brought the tape down and around and back up here to the top. And now I'm going to smooth that all out. And I'm going to do this, just the same tape pattern 4 or 5 times for this layer here. And the easy way to do this, the best way to do this speedily, is to figure out how much length of tape you need in relation to however long your arm is, and just kind of get used to however much tape you have to pull. So for my next piece of tape, I'm gonna start it where I left off last time, like this, and I'm pressing in but not down, doing the 45-degree angle, bringing it down around the bottom of the arrow, spinning, and bringing it back up, like this. See, now if I spin this, it's a little bit off center, so I'm going to fix it a little bit as I go. It's kind of sticking out right here. It's a little better. So I'm going to smooth that piece of tape and add more. So I think right here is kind of where it was sticking out. So my next piece of tape is going to go right there. I'm going to press in and not down. And wrap that tape around the bottom. And spin and bring it up to the top. Recenter. That's decent. So this will be black tape piece number 4. And I'm doing at a 45-degree angle again. I'm just going to keep doing the 45s down around the bottom and up. And I'm just kind of forming an ice cream cone out of this tape that's going to cup and hold this, this piece of foam up here and hold it in place. And I'm looking for if it's lopsided and how I can adjust it. You can see that if you spin it and it wobbles, you see where it's kind of sticking out, and then you just make adjustments, push it a little bit this way and that way. I think I'll do one more piece of tape here. Good. So, okay, this is my inner layer of tape. I've got my little ice cream cone going here. You can spin it, and it looks pretty symmetrical, right? Maybe tip it this way just a little bit. All right, that's pretty good. Then next, I'm gonna take my piece of fabric and put it over the top here. And I'm gonna try and center this as best as I can with it just kind of resting on top of the arrow. So I'm grabbing opposite sides of this and just kind of fooling with it and trying to make it as centered as possible before I do anything else. Okay, so now I feel like that's centered pretty well. And now I'm taking my little finger-sized pieces of tape and I'm going to use these to just hold this fabric in place so then I can put more stronger layers of tape onto it. I'm going to pull ever so slightly on the fabric as I press this down like that. Just holding that in place. And so I'm going to go around all four sides of my square. Well, I guess it's an octagon, but I'm going to do 4 of these as if it's a square. Like this to hold it in place. And so the technique for this is I'm pressing this duct tape into the fabric and the fabric is still loose from the arrow, and then I'm pulling just a smidge and pressing the tape to the arrow like that. All right, last side. All right. So now my fabric is held onto my arrow and I can spin it and work some more tape onto it. So here's my last 4 of my bigger pieces of tape that I already made. And what I'll do with these, I'm going to take each one of these pieces of fabric that is kind of sticking out. I'm going to try and smooth it and flatten it down onto the arrow. Like this. Right. And I mean, I guess you could just fold it over, but I like the aesthetic of kind of smoothing this down. And then again, you can feel with your thumb, if you kind of touch your thumb or your fingers, you can feel where that open cell foam meets the other layers here. I don't want my tape to come more than 1/3 of the way up because that it makes the arrow hit harder, and that's not what you want. You want a nice bonky arrow, not a punch to the face. So right here where my thumbnail is where the base of the arrow is, and above it is that open cell foam. So I'm going to put my tape like this and smooth it down. And it's a little crooked because I'm doing it sideways, but that's all right. So like that. There's my first piece. And then I'm going to do the opposite side. So again, I'm going to flatten this little thing out, kind of tuck it down, apply my tape, and smooth it out. And this will help with the structure. Like this. And last one. So duct tape has little threads in it, and the threads in this duct tape are going up and down and side to side, right? And then when we put in the black tape, the threads of the black tape are going to be going at the 45-degree angles. So that's kind of how you reinforce the arrow in these different directions. So then again, as I go, I'm going to check it for symmetry, and it seems pretty good. I know that the tape is a little lopsided, but when you're looking at the arrow, you don't have to look at the tape as much as when you turn the arrow, watch the side of it, and if it's going back and forth to your eye while you're watching the side of it when you spin it, that's how you can identify if it's getting lopsided. So then I'm going to do the same technique again with this black tape, going at 45-degree angles to reinforce the structure here. So, and never going more than like 1/3 of the way up on the open cell foam. So here's my first layer. This is the this will be the outside tape that everyone will see. And if you put on what you think is enough black tape and there is still duct tape showing, that is okay. It is just cosmetic. There is not a rule that says it has to be all covered in black tape or duct tape or the same color of tape. It is okay if an arrow is not attractive or if it has different kinds of tape showing. And the reason I say that is I have had people try to fail arrows before because there was a little bit of tape, duct tape showing. And so right here, I feel like this piece of tape, I've made it a little bit too long. So I'll just pick at it a little bit and tear a piece off. And I'm just going to keep going around this arrow, doing these 45-degree angles with the black tape. And after I apply each one, I smooth it out. I think I want to put one more right here. Okay. Looks pretty good. So then lastly, to kind of like hold all of this together, if your arrows are in a hot car or the hot sun, some of this tape might start to come undone a little bit. So I like to put a couple of layers of tape around this way to kind of cinch everything together like a belt. And this doesn't need to be quite as long. And I'm going to put one piece of tape up here kind of towards the base of this open cell foam, and then another piece down here around like the belly of it. And I'm going to take my tape and kind of center it this way. I'm going to do the center first because this arrow is an ice cream cone shape, and it's easier to smooth the tape out around the back if you have less of it to smooth out, like this. And then lastly, one piece just around the middle to hold everything together, and there's the arrow. The last step in completing our arrow is to add the draw stop. In Belagarth, the rule is that an arrow cannot be drawn more than 28 inches, and the 28 inches starts not at the end of the knock like this, but it starts where the bowstring would rest, like in here, inside the knock. That's the knocking point. So I'm going to measure 28 inches. I have a cutting board here, and I'll show you what I'm doing. So I'm looking to measure my knock. I'm going to line it up like this. So that's where the bowstring sits, inside that knock. And then I'm going to go this way. And there's my 28 inches. So that's how I'll measure. And I'm going to use 1/3 of a width of a roll of duct tape, like this. So let's see. My 28 inches is here. And once you get the first piece on there, it's pretty easy to keep going with the rest of it. You have to build this up to be at least 1/4 inch thick. Let's see, is this thick enough? It is. So here's what it looks like. There's the finished product. Happy shooting. I'm going to go over how to attach nocks to new arrows. So this is a brand new arrow, and you can see on any arrow there's ideally 2 fletchings of one color and 1 fletching of a different color. And the reason for that is because when you load the arrow into your bow, the 2 fletches of one color go against the bow, and the 1 fletch of a different color goes away from the bow. So that way you know it'll fly straight out of the bow and not twist. But unfortunately, what sometimes happens is the knock either comes crooked or it becomes crooked as we play. These can twist, these can come off and get lost. So what I'm going to do is use a 2-part epoxy to affix the knock into the arrow shaft. So you can see it should be straight in here. So when it goes onto the string, the proper fletch is away from the bow. Sometimes you can use your fingers for this. Sometimes you need pliers to pull it out. So there's the knock. That's what it looks like. And it's going to go right in here. The two-part epoxy that I'm going to use is Gorilla Glue brand two-part epoxy. And you can get this at any big box hardware store like Home Depot or Lowe's, or you can also just order it on Amazon. So here it is. It's 2 sections of this liquid, and you pump it out and you mix the liquids together, and then it forms, it starts a chemical reaction, and then it solidifies over the next like 24 hours. So here I'm going to just make a little puddle of this stuff. And this can be done on a paper plate or a piece of cardboard or whatever kind of disposable thing. Don't do it on something that you want to save. And it comes with a little cap so you can save it for later. And then I'll get a little toothpick. And use the toothpick to mix up the two-part epoxy. Make sure that you mix it up really well, or else the chemical reaction won't start and you'll wind up with just a slimy arrow knock and it'll be permanently slimy. So I'm going to take just a little dab of this. You don't need much. I'm going to put it in the arrow shaft. I'm going to take the arrow knock and kind of twist it as I put it in there. And make sure that the knock is lined up with the fletching, like this. And now that's done. And then the final step to this is it takes about 24 hours for this to harden all the way. So go and set this with the knock down somewhere, maybe against the wall in the garage or on a piece of cardboard against a wall somewhere where it won't be bothered, so that it can dry straight. For replacing a arrow fletching that's missing, you can use the same two-part epoxy, and you would take a razor and make sure that this little bit of fletch that's left on here gets scraped away. Might not be 100%, but as good as possible. And you can get replacement fletches like this. These are 4-inch veins. You want to get whatever size of vein your old arrow has to replace with. And then you take your two-part epoxy and you just run a little dab of it. And this two-part epoxy works surprisingly well. and you place it where the old fletch used to be. Make sure it's stuck on there well. And then you set it aside for 24 hours and you'll have a passable fletch.